Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we are talking about all things Ankr. That's right, and anchored in the hot seat right now is Ryan Fang. Thank you so much, mate, for being on the channel today.
Hey, Brad.
So if you're not familiar with Ryan, he is the COO of Ankr. He is well experienced in all the business aspects, and he certainly can speak on behalf of Ankr in terms of tech as well. So Ryan, obviously a lot has happened since we've spoken in the headquarters of Ankr in the Silicon Valley. Can you tell us firstly, for those who perhaps don't know, what is Ankr specifically in, let's say, a minute?
Oh, okay. So yeah, Ankr is a decentralized cloud computing platform built on trusted hardware. We are really the first, sort of combining both trusted hardware, TE, trusted execution environment, along with blockchain, and basically solve the, problem of traditional distributed computing, project. Let's say, Boeing project, SETI at home. Those projects are distributed computing, but there's no incentive, there's no confidentiality, and also there's a lot of redundancy. And with the TE technology, with our proof of useful work consensus mechanism, we're building this decentralized cloud computing platform with incentive, which is obviously the Ankr token, and confidentiality, which is provided by execution on the enclave, and widely reduced redundancy, because the proof of useful work and consensus mechanism essentially sees can verify the execution
Sure.
enclave.
Sure,
Right? So
and sorry to interrupt, but just because there's so much involved, I want to stop you there for a moment because I know you could talk for hours on Ankr. Now, clearly, understanding the fundamentals is important. You can go to the website if you haven't. If you, certainly can go into the white paper. But Ryan, I want to get down into the business of the day, and that is to explore some of the concerns. Recently, you've had an AMA. And certainly you've heard the feedback from the community. Let's talk about them. Let's get real. Let's talk about the team for a start. There's a lot of discussion about that, and quite frankly, I've heard quite enough about the age factor. Tell us from your position what your view is and why.
well, look, I am young. Chandler is young, but who's here? Stanley and Song, can you guys come around a little bit?
Well, for those who aren't sure where Ryan is right now, he's actually in the Ankr headquarters, and you can see they're all wearing their Ankr shirts. So you can see now other members. You can see Stanley on the right. You can also see other members there. So once again, there are different ages, and I think that's the idea that Ryan is trying to show right now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, yes, Chandler is young, I am young, but we've got, pretty old guys here, Song.
Thank you. So thank you firstly for wearing your brands. Nice plug, by the way, Ryan. So thank you, Stanley, if you come into the shot a bit and drop your head. So we can see Stanley. There he is. So Stanley is one of the key architects of Ankr as well. And as Ryan is trying to show and not just say, there are varying degrees of age and experience in the team. So thank you very, very much for doing that, Ryan. Now let's focus on you. Now you are young. Yes, we know that. Now let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the thing is, I think we've answered this question multiple times. Our lead engineers, Stanley, Song, Shouyan, and Giacomo, who recently, joined Ankr. They're all extremely, experienced in the industry. They all have long, at least 10 years of experience, either in cloud computing or security. I think our team, the tech, is extremely experienced. The tech team is extremely experienced. They certainly know how to make things happen as quick as possible. They certainly know what they're doing, right? And on the business side, Chandler was actually also one of the coders of the initial development of Ankr, also serving as the product manager of the project. Now, and obviously right now, Chandler and I, we run lots of the business aspect, of the company,
Right.
Marketing, along with community and etc. Now the thing is, when you think about it, it's actually nice to have younger people to run those things, because all those things are new. It's new to me. It's new to many people. The business development aspect of a blockchain company is new. Even if you are 60, you won't have 10 years of experience running, blockchain companies biz staff,
I
right?
see. Currently, what you mean is that the technology is so new that someone of that age may not have that kind of experience. So let's go back a bit, though. I want to ask you something directly. But with regard to age, sorry to interrupt, but I really want to get this out for you, is that what you're saying is that age doesn't preclude people from having expertise in a field. I understand that, but I do want to talk to you about on the entrepreneurial component that both you and Chandler advertise that you have on your website. It's very clear that it says serial entrepreneur. So my question to you for the public is this. It's one thing to be young and to be experienced, but it's another thing to have a focus on business. So why is it that the CEO and the COO are fit to lead when their experience comes from business and not tech?
Well, so first of all, Chandler is, more of a tech background. He is the one, first came up with this and say, look, we can use this to achieve decentralized cloud computing.
Okay, so can I just interrupt you for a moment? Are you saying that Chandler as a CEO is first and foremost technologically driven, and then secondly, more the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, his degree isn't in business administration. His degree is in ECS.
I see.
Right?
Well, the reason why I ask this is because the public really need to know specifically, because there's a bit of a sentiment out in if you look at Telegram, if you look at other channels that you do have, there's concerns perhaps that it's one or the other. So it's important that we clear this up right now. Are you saying that Chandler spends most of his time in the field of tech with the team?
Yeah. He is also the product manager, of Ankr.
Right. Okay, well, that's important to know. Now, let's talk about your role specifically. You mentioned both you and Chandler are young. You are the COO. Can you tell us specifically what is your role and what do you spend most of your time doing in Ankr?
Now, so first of all, realistically, from earlier of Ankr project, my first role actually is the first investor to the project, support a project for very early development, right? So we didn't, as you can see on our cell structure, we don't necessarily have a seed investor. The first sort of outside check coming in late January. There were checks came in around March, April, and but I would say that I was really the starting seed investor. That was my initial role.
Right.
And Chandler was the person who got me interested in Bitcoin and blockchain investment earlier on, right? Now, so that was my first role, and later on, I had more and more involvement to the project, obviously, and I started to run not only the fundraising process but also the business development aspect of the company. For example, what are the companies that we should talk to? Like we have already signed partnerships with two Fortune 500 company, which we will announce very soon. We are already, some of their cloud computing service provider once our network is live,
right.
and all the progresses we've made and I've made personally in business development.
Okay, so to interrupt, but obviously you put your money where your mouth is. You put your blockchain invest money where your mouth is, in the sense that you've literally invested into the company and you have a belief in it. Now, can you tell me exactly? Yeah. Sorry, just to pause for a minute. Can you tell me, Ryan, what was the key thing that really pushed you over the edge in terms of investment decision? What was the one thing that made you think that Ankr's really got something for the long term?
Well, first of all, I think there are two reasons. First is the people, the person. Second is the vision, right? So a bit of a background story. Chandler and I, we've been a college roommate for 4 years. The whole he was probably the third person I met in college, and 2 weeks in, that was back in 2014. 2 weeks in, in our college life, Chandler came up to me and say, Ryan, I'm starting to learn about blockchain, and I think you and I and there was another guy. He was like, we should really get our hands on some of the Bitcoin, right? So
this is very reminiscent of some of the narratives we've heard about Facebook and other stories like that. in terms of, you know, interest in building something and then having friends in literally inside universities invest. Can you see the synergies, and can you see the concern why people would have, you know, a thinking that perhaps this could be something where friends have got together and just found a way to make something?
Well, the thing is, I think here's how I think about it. It's people are all trying to make something, right? No matter what kind of business you are in, you're trying to make something. Like we are trying to make something that's great, that's beneficial to hopefully to every single person in the world. A truly distributed cloud computing infrastructure and platform, yeah, you know, even it was only me and Chandler started to discuss about it. Yes, we probably want to build that. There's nothing wrong about it. That's exactly what got me excited, what got him excited, what got you know, that's where the vision was born. You know, I think I can, you know, speak more about it. You know, I have a finance background. You know, cloud computing obviously being one of the most profitable business. You know, it is, you know, the centralized cloud only tech giants can be part of. You know, the Google,
AWS,
the Amazon,
right?
Yeah, AWS, you know, AWS, Microsoft Azure, you know, Google Cloud. In China, there's Alibaba Cloud, Tencent Cloud. You know, all of those are huge, massive players. You know,
we're talking billions and billions of dollars here for each of them.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they all have massive, you know, upfront infrastructure costs.
Sure.
And no small players are entered into the field, and their margin is tremendous. You know, 25% operating margin for any tech company is unthinkable.
Right. Well, let's talk about this a bit more. Let's get really into it. Now, your background is finance, Ryan. So let's explore the premise for you. Now, obviously, money's, you know, imperative for everybody, but whether it be in business or in real life. But in terms of this project, is it money or is it tech that really drives you in terms of profit, or is it for something that can really be a game changer for the world of business and beyond?
To be frank, for me personally, it is about what's making sense, what's not making sense, what should be the case. Like, for example, you know, if you think about it, if one business in the world, you know, I'm thinking about it from a finance perspective. If one business in the world, there are only, let's say, 5 or 6 players, and all of them are making, you know, 25% operating margin, how does that make sense, right? Shouldn't there be some way to make this actually less profitable? Should there be more, you know, competition in the field, right? Should the business, should the service be, you know, cheaper? You know, I've been you know, statistics major when I was in college. There are machine learning models that I need to do, right? And whenever I use my personal computer to do it, you know, let's say you draw clusters. You know, when you're doing, let's say you draw a random forest, right? And that takes a long time for your computer to run it, right? Especially if you draw more trees, it really takes a long time.
So it's a matter of trying to improve efficiency, and all the other aspects that the blockchain offers.
Yes, like I cannot, you know, when I was in college, I cannot afford AWS to run my homework on AWS.
So,
and you know,
so what you're saying, sorry to interrupt, but you're saying you're tech-driven, Ryan. You're driven by the technology and the possibility and the prospects of it really doing something revolutionary in the space. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, but I don't want to be cynical. I want to be upfront and honest and straightforward. Yes, you know, making a startup, making something great will make money, and that should be the incentive that comes with, you know, building exciting technology.
Right. Well, let's talk about that in detail right now in terms of the crypto startup, because they are unique in comparison to traditional marketplaces. Let's explore, because you are the COO, and you certainly were part of the team that led this from the beginning. Now, to start this off, you obviously need capital. And to get capital, clearly you need to engage with crypto VCs. So let's explore exactly what the compromises are that you've had to make, and what are the concerns, and what is the process you were involved in trying to get capital from the beginning, and at what cost, if there are any.
Yeah. I mean, every single company have a different journey of, you know, getting funding, right? For us, you know, I think there are some lucky part to it. For example, I sold the company when I was a freshman. It was an educational startup, so there was some initial capital, there, right? And at the same time, because of Chandler, thanks to Chandler, who told me to buy Bitcoin back in 2014, right? So that's another part of capital. So start from the beginning. We didn't have to necessarily have an outside seed investor, which is nice because you don't need to give up too much percent of your company. You won't necessarily have someone who later on really.
So for transparency, and I do appreciate your honesty, you are arguably one of the key stakeholders in the company in Ankr, because you did invest at the very earliest level and at the time period. Now, thank you for letting us know that. That does matter. Now, if we talk about the VCs though, tell us a bit about the process and any compromises you've had to make in terms of whether it be lockups. Let's talk about degree, site, magnitude of investments. Anything you're able to tell us, obviously, for transparency.
Yeah, because I think there's one thing I want to say and want to tell really everyone who's watching the video, right? Now, we think it's extremely unfair to have, basically, VCs getting too different of a deal, right? Let's say right now you have a seed investor, right? And, you go to the end of the private sale, it's already, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. That's completely out of mind. Right?
We've seen that happen, to be frank. We've seen that happen many times. Right now, that's happening with many projects, Ryan. So let's get real about that. Are you doing anything like that?
No, I think that's absolutely ridiculous and stupid. Because, like, for example, in our structure, the cheapest investment ever, really out of all VCs is Pantera, DHVC, and NGC. The price they got in, the company was valued at $33 million US. Now, and if they subscribe to the $33 million US valuation, their token is locked up completely for 6 months. For example, Pantera's allocation is fully locked, and DHVC as well, and GC have partially unlocked and partially locked, right? And if when we mentioned NGC, when they're the part that's unlocked in the first tranche, that's the valuation at 44 million. Like, you have to pay in order to have some of the upfront liquidity. And I think this is something we're doing rather different from many other projects.
I see.
There's no one who get a 7-time, when public sale haven't started, which I think doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? For a company's valuation, from a traditional finance perspective, a company's valuation go from, let's say, from 10 million to 100 million within 2 months. That doesn't make sense.
Now, Ryan, one thing I did want to say, to interrupt for a moment, is that I've spoken to many different COOs, CTOs, and CEOs, and very rarely, if not, I can't actually think of one that has the degree of transparency that you literally just said to me. Now, that is a game changer, and the reason why is because you're letting the people know exactly from the outset what the allocation and lockup model is for your VCs. Now, that's in my assessment of this is a very transparent approach for Ankr. It can do only good because it allows the people to know right from the beginning the risks, the inherent risks from their own position with regard to how the VCs are going to potentially treat you. And that is going to possibly change everything if everyone in every project follows suit. Because the more transparent projects get, the better this is for the ecosystem. So what do you say to those, VCs who might respond and say, no, we'd like to keep it more private?
Well, because that's, okay, when we think about it, from a finance perspective, it is fully okay for a company to not disclose it, right? Legally, a company have all the rights to not disclose the investment term of certain VCs, right? There's nothing legally wrong about it.
Right.
But wrong about this is that if you have general public, right? If you have general public, especially when you get on the exchange, you have tens of thousands people who are holding your token, especially who have the token. If so many people are investing in your company and they don't have the disclosure, that's ridiculous. That's unheard of. When you think about it, in the traditional market, before crypto, before this new way of funding, a traditional company goes through certain runs, right? And a person, a normal person, a everyday person want to buy a piece of the company, you have to wait it to be public. And a public company will have all kinds of the disclosure to it, so that you don't need to talk to each and every single one of them. That okay, we're this company, we're making this cash flow. Thus, you should invest in us because information all disclosed and people can see it.
Sure.
Right?
So everything's inherently transparent by design, and likely that will transition as the marketplace for the decentralized marketplace evolves. No doubt that will also change over time. But right now we see a very different climate, one that is very complex and certainly driven by different agendas. And that's why I do sincerely appreciate, as an objective speaker, someone who's being real in your seat. It is very rare. Now, let's talk a little bit more about, once again, the fundamentals. Let's talk about what is the key incentive for investors with regard to the long-term hold. What really encourages them to believe in you? What's the fundamental tech?
Yeah, so I think, so the way we think about this, when a person investing essentially in utility, in Ankr token, the idea is, not only you can in the future use it, but also it is sort of a, like getting a seed investment, say, say in something like Facebook, Google, Amazon, stuff like that, right? It's not only an investment, but also a utility, right? So in terms of the fundamental value to this token is the reality, is the utility part of the token. Because when you think about it, I think I've explained earlier on in the video that cloud computing is a huge market. It's projected to be 400 billion by the end of 2020. Now, in that huge market, there are only, let's say, 5-6 real players, and it is a process. It is a vision, basically. People are buying to democratize this space. I'm not saying we can do everything that AWS does, because that's going to be a irresponsible claim. Right, we're saying there are computational tasks, sort of a bag of tasks. Those are the stuff. Those are the initial goals we're trying to reach, the initial problems that we're trying to solve, and that's a big market already. Right. If when we think about it, if you use AWS to do a task, it take 1 hour, and let's say it may take a day on your own computer, right? And if it also take a day on Ankr platform, but at the same time, you are spending less than 25% of what AWS is charging you. Which one would you use? Obviously, you would use the cheaper version, right? But yes, there are things that AWS can do, we cannot do. We cannot do, even I would say in the short future. Like for example, we are doing decentralized computing. We're not doing decentralized storage at this point of time, right? We will leverage other decentralized storage platform to deliver the full experience, the full infrastructure, right? Now, but the compute part, the computational part, people, I don't see reason people not switching to us. As it's going to be cheaper.
Well, let's talk about that in more detail. Now, you mentioned that it's economical. You mentioned that you're going to be an architecture that broadens itself in scope and reach and in technology over time. And first and foremost, right now, you are that focus of DCC. Now, what I wanted to talk about is you mentioned utility. But let's talk about that in the real sense, because it's easy to say utility and then not go further. So can you give us some evidence with regard to business interests right now in Ankr that indicate real world investment, real enterprise, and then let's talk about evidence of the future as well with Ankr in terms of how you're going to build the DCC?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on, there were two companies, very reputable, large, especially software solution provider. Basically a software solution provider. I'm not necessarily going to name them. Software provider, let's say IBM, a SAP, a Accenture, those companies. Now what they would do is essentially a company, find them, right? Say, okay, I need to do those are my infrastructure goals, right? I need tasks to be run on the cloud, right? And then they will recommend you that what are your options. They can recommend you AWS, they can recommend you Microsoft Azure, and they can recommend them Ankr, right? and that's what we have done with those providers. We've tell them about what we're doing. We've showed them our prototype. We've showed them what we were able to achieve, and they also think it makes sense. They though it's certainly a relatively experimental stage as of now.
So are they investing in you, Ryan?
They're not investing because there's too big of a they will have to put in too big of a check for them to make business sense, and we cannot take a big check.
Okay.
You see what I'm
So
saying?
let's get back to the business though of the discussions of connections. Why talk about them if they're not going to invest in you?
Well, so in terms of the business relationship, there is investment relationship and there is simple business relationship, right? When you think about it, if you let's say if you're Microsoft, right? Does Microsoft believe in Dell's PC? I think in many ways they do believe in it, right? Does Microsoft necessarily invest in Dell? Not really, right? Because they're in different businesses.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about alignments of interest, synergies in business, but I want to talk to you about the ones that are inherently part of Ankr. Tell us some of those. What's some of the ones you can tell us, if at all you can, given there are NDAs, about some of the plans for, rolling out the business model?
Right. So there, first of all, there are, obviously blockchain-focused, VCs investing in us.
Sure.
As I mentioned, the investor, the Pantera, the NGC, the DHVCs of the world. They have insights to this industry. They know what's going on, and that they believe in us. They invest in us. I think they certainly have a strong network within the space, which will help us in the long run. And many of them have stake in the company for the long run.
So essentially, what you're saying, sorry to interrupt, but we just need to make sure we're clear, is you're investing in the connections of these significant crypto VCs in order to rely on some of the capacities they have to build out with long-term businesses and long-term projects that want to do something of value in the sort of decentralized crypto and blockchain community. That's all well and good, but again, I still want to talk about beyond crypto and beyond the crypto VC.
Yeah, exactly. We also have a partner, business development partner. It's called Singularity Capital. It is one of the leading, cash management business in China. You might ask me why we partner with a cash management business. So the idea is, they have a very long list of startup clients. They have a long list of startups that they sell their service to, almost covering a huge number of the Chinese startups, right? And all of them have one similarity. Not only they need more than day cash management business, but also they need more than day cloud service, right? So you think about the business development process. Is it easier for you to let's say go to a tech company, say, look, let's use our cloud, or is it easier for you to go through a provider of that company and tell them that, okay, look, right now we have a partner who has this cloud solution. Are you willing to give a try? We have already run your cash management business. Do you think that this is the idea of lend and sell, the idea of business development partners, the idea of business development channels? That's how we think about it. That's obviously one initial step, and the funders.
So it's one good example. Now, what I want to talk to you about is very direct, the next thing. With regard to exchanges, obviously every project needs access to exchanges to essentially be traded and to have that token economy live. Now, I want to talk about that in terms of what planning you put forth to build out the access to exchanges. And I also want to talk about that in the context of, transparency with regard to what are the impacts and what are the processes you've had to do with regard to using the skill sets, the services of different VCs even, because obviously they would have connections.
Yeah, so I think it's a modern day age. It's not that hard to talk to anyone in the world if you really want to, right? And obviously, the VCs make intros, the VCs, help us, set up meetings with, exchanges. We reach out to them ourselves.
Sure.
Their top ones, the top ones would be, the Binance, the Huobi, the OK Exchange, and in fact, OK Exchange is one of our investor earlier on.
Yes, I did notice that. That's why I asked.
Yeah. Now the thing is, we believe once again, we want to make this also extremely transparent. We will be listed very soon after our public sale. The exact exchange that we will make our debut is yet to be revealed.
So you can't tell us. I mean, obviously the public would love to know that. You can't tell us?
I cannot tell you at this moment in time. We will announce once our public sale is finished.
I see. But can I ask you, Ryan, is it one of the more reputable exchanges?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well,
yes.
thank you again for your transparency. Now, I want to ask you about pump and dump risks. And I will ask you this because it is the sentiment from some in the community, and I always will represent that. Now, whenever, and you alluded to this before, with great transparency, that there is degrees of unlocked tokens offered to some VCs, and obviously you've chosen to do that. Now, are you at all concerned that we could see a decline in value once it goes onto exchange because of the access that some have to the exchange other than in comparison to others?
No, when you think about it, I think it's unhealthy to have, in my opinion, it's unhealthy to have too much locked token when you think about it, because that's essentially just pushing things, to the future, right? So for us, we took a very, different approach from many other projects. Our private investment round, there are 150 investors in total.
Okay.
I think it's more than 150. So the allocation of each investor, the average size of each investor is rather small. And the unlocked token, there are many, let's say 100 or 50, 100 or 50. Those allocations might be unlocked, but they are partners across different countries across the globe. And we think it's in fact much more healthier for them to have it unlocked, because this way they can help us to distribute it around the globe, to sell it to tell people in the local.
So essentially what you're saying, sorry to interrupt again, but you're saying that your methodology has been all about distribution, global distribution, maximizing reach for the value of the Ankr economy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there are more than 20 countries, investor in our in our allocation. 20 countries. I think a little bit more than 20 countries actually.
I see.
Yeah.
So again, that's been your strategy, and obviously as a COO, you have been directly involved in that. And once again, thank you for explaining the truth about the unlocked and the locked aspects, and also being so honest about the VCs. It's very rare.
Yeah, because when you think about it, this might be offensive to some people, to some VC. At the end of the day, the people who are gonna use Ankr token are not the VCs. They will not have that much, useful work or computational task they need to run. They make investment decisions. They don't use AWS, right? So it doesn't make sense for them to hold large amount of Ankr token anyways.
I think you raise a very important point, and to be honest, as a researcher, that's why I like to see on white papers evidence of investors who are looking at the utility. So what I mean by that is businesses who are backing the utility clearly for what they do as a business themselves. Now, when we see a whole line of VCs that are crypto VCs, that to me indicates nothing more than money. Quite sincerely, because that is about capital. You need capital to start a startup. But what evidence does Ankr or any of the projects have that go beyond that? That's what we're looking for, is to see that there's real evidence in some respects to show that you can be a utility. You can actually be real in the business space.
Yeah, so I think there are two questions I'm trying to answer here. First, in terms of, whose stake is involved, let's say, well, the idea is, in the investment end, if Ankr is a platform that's already perfectly deployed and perfectly runnable in every single corner of the world at this moment in time, we won't need to raise capital. The reason of raising capital is to make the network. We obviously have a prototype, have a demo, have a
well, let's talk about that. Now, I've personally seen that in operation. I've been to the very house or the headquarters you are in right now. Now, you are confident you have the prototypes, you have a working product. How important is that right now in the setting you're in as you are about to move into the exchange and complete your ICO?
Yeah, I think, to be frank, I think it is an important reassurance to the market and tell the market, what we are up to. And that's one. Sorry, look, there's one more thing I want to say. When you compare the traditional investing world and the crypto investing world, it's absolutely crucial to realize that companies, in the blockchain world are, in some way are valued, on higher multiples, if you think about it, on much higher multiples than traditional company. Why? It's because of the liquidity. It's because the fact, people can participate in the investment, right? We think about it, let's say if a deal only Sequoia and Andreessens of the world can get access to, obviously it's going to be, it's not gonna be that expensive. If you think about it. If it's a deal that everybody can buy into, obviously there are more buy orders, and it is going to have higher valuation.
And that's exactly why DD is so imperative, Ryan. That's why it's so important that technology drive this, because we've seen last year hype drove everything. And so obviously tech, and that's why I asked in the beginning, tech is the incentive for you personally. It's what's driving your passion and your interest in Ankr. It's why you invested at the very earliest level. So, I think the thing is, the point I'm always trying to make it clear is that as entrepreneurs, do we have financial incentives involved? Yes, absolutely. Will I make money by starting a company like Ankr? Yes, I will. But that's not the end goal. The end goal is doing something truly exciting. The end goal is bringing something, as I mentioned before, makes sense to the world. And that's what we want to hear, Ryan. Ryan Fang as the CEO. Well, that's what we want to hear from those who we're trying to better understand as executives of projects. Because quite simply, we cannot rely on the feedback solely from VCs, because their reasoning and their incentives are very different. And whilst they may align in interests, fundamentally what we're looking for is tech-driven systems and projects for both now and the future of this industry. So thank you very much for explaining everything today. Now, Ryan, obviously you've had an AMA recently. Is there anything you'd like to say to finalize this interview today that there's concerns you've heard about, or just simply a final statement for those who want to know more about Ankr?
Yeah, so I think so let me continue on on the question.
Yeah, please do. As a closing statement, please do.
Yeah, it's at a fundraising stage of a company, it's almost impossible to have investors that are purely interested in the utility of the token of whatever whatever utility that is, right? So the idea is people who invest in money, in the project, people who bought into the project, bought into our mission, obviously are looking for a financial gain, right? But what we can do on our end to make that transition as smooth as possible. Like, for example, if you right now have, let's say we raised, close to 15 million, in private, right? Let's say if that 15 million is from, one VC, obviously that wouldn't make sense, right? They would.
It would be monopolistic.
It'd be monopolistic, and it would not help the global adoption, right? Because let's say if I'm a VC guy, for many VCs, 15 mil isn't that huge of a number, right? If we buy the entire run,
well,
right?
Just to clarify, sorry to interrupt, but 15 mil. Can you tell the audience why are you mentioning that number in terms of your metrics?
Well, that's what we raised in our private pre-sale.
Right. So for those who aren't aware, we are talking about $15 million USD as the total raise for the private pre-sale. Yeah.
So the idea is, if let's say only one investor took up the entire chunk, obviously that doesn't make sense, right? Because they were not a VC partner will not help you help the adoption of your project across the globe. Versus right now we have 150 investors across the globe in 20 countries who will tell their friends and family, tell people around them what we're doing, what we're about. And yes, they're looking for financial gain. That's totally fine. But when they sell their token, when they are essentially dispersing the token in many ways, they are helping the adoption of Ankr, and we think that's there is certainly a compromise. In theory, the best thing could happen to a project is everyone who is buying the token is only looking for utility, but that's not realistic.
I think
You know,
that's a very honest response, to be totally frank with you. It's completely
right?
real and completely true from my experience so far observing in the blockchain, simply because there are different reasons, and one of the reasons that drives blockchain right now is money. So what you're saying is the strategy for Ankr has always been that you are wanting to disperse the token into the real economy so that it can be something of value and utility in the future.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
You know, and as you mentioned, you know, blockchain, just like, you know, back in, let's say back in 20 years ago, right? There was internet boom, right? There's, you know, all capital, all venture capital is flowing into internet. You know, companies that doesn't make sense got huge valuation, even go to public, right? Now we believe every single era have technologies that's exciting. Capitals will come in, will support that. You know, that it makes sense, right?
It's also what creates bubbles.
Yeah, it's what creates the bubble, but it was also something that pushes the brightest mind in the world to work on something that truly makes sense, that truly will bring the change to the world. Let's say if there were no VC money, a huge amount of capital inflow to tech company back in 2000, we won't see our Amazon, we won't see our Google, which is really the guys we kind of trying to disrupt right now. And you know, at least as of now, we're still thinking that's more of a complement solution, not a replacement.
Right, you've made that clear that you don't want to be a direct competitor to, say, something like AWS. We understand that. And we also understand that there are other centralized mechanisms in place for DCC right now, in the sense of cloud computing at least. But Ryan, you know, as I said before, you've done an AMA recently. So tell us in a nutshell, you know, what are some of the primary things that, you know, the community is showing and engaging with regard to their sentiment about Ankr? I want to finish off with that sort of respect for the social media avenues you've created and their input. What's some of the positions they hold that you've learned recently?
Yeah, I think if you look at, we actually have already sort of put together all the AMA questions that, you know, people in the community have asked us. Obviously, there are questions such as, you know, when moon, when galaxy, when Mars, when moon. Right? There are going to be questions like this, and I don't necessarily think they're questions that's we want to necessarily prevent. You know, because when someone is investing something or buying something, it makes sense for them to hope the price of certain token, you know, for example, in our case, Ankr token, to be high, right? There's nothing wrong about it, but at the same time, we also see people who are genuinely interested in technology, who are interested in the you know, SGX adoption, right? In how to use SGX to make this decentralized cloud computing network. There are technology discussion. There are questions about, you know, what's the difference, let's say, between Ankr and other cloud computing platform. What are the different approach and why Ankr is better or why another project is better, right? I think a lot of companies, not a lot, let's say, you know, a good amount of company is trying to tackle this challenge, decentralized.
And so what you're saying is you value both. You value those who have a tech premise and those who also understand and respect the imperative of hype. You know, for want of a better word, the reality is that's an essential criterion for the success of a startup. Yeah,
I think those are both extremely important fact, you know, of a successful startup. I invested in Amazon a long time ago. I bought Amazon stock, but I don't actually use Amazon service, like in terms of
I see what you're saying. And you also don't get a return for a very long time on that investment either.
Well, yeah, I did not, but obviously, as we all know, you know, last year or the year before last year, you know, Amazon's, you know, stock is performing very well. More and more people.
Sure. Well, on that note, let's finish off. And firstly, I'd like to say, you know, in conclusion, thank you very much for your time. You are in the headquarters of Ankr right now. And thank you for your transparency today. I do appreciate that. It's quite refreshing to hear these kind of open comments. And you are, as a CEO, a lead member of the Ankr team. And for those who aren't aware, make sure that you do invest some time, do your DD, go into the white paper, dig deep, go to the website, get to know, connect with the team. But once again, I wish you all the very best, and I look forward to having some updates with you in the future, and hopefully with your CEO as well, with Chandler.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, you know, highly recommend people to watch the little sort of run through, that you did when you came to our headquarters, and that's what we have achieved, so far. As we can see, it is up and running, and we're thinking we are really up to something that's truly exciting.
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again. So it's Ryan Fang. He is the COO in the hot seat today. Thank you very much for being so real today on the blockchain. Take care.
Thank you.